Welcome to Intermediate Training for Twitter. As you know, we always talk about mindset, tools, and strategy, and we'll do that again when we start talking about Twitter. Let's start with mindset. One of the most important things that you can remember when it comes to a mindset for Twitter is what is often called the 70-20-10 rule. Let me explain. 70% of the tweets that you post and the content that you talk about on Twitter should be about sharing meaningful, relevant content. Now you may ask, well, what do you mean by that? Where do I find meaningful, relevant content? Well, here's 3 places to do that. Number 1 is find content from the people that you follow on Twitter. As you find interesting people to follow, they say interesting things. And when you read interesting things that they talk about, you can retweet that content from your Twitter account. The second way is to find people in your profession who publish content. You're not simply limited to people that you follow on Twitter. You can tweet about content that you find anywhere. People in your profession publish content that's meaningful. Determine what content may be interesting to your patients and to your prospective patients, and then tweet about that information and pass it along to other people. The third place to find relevant content is simply use search engines like Google. Use tools like Google Alerts to target keywords for content. The 20% refers to responding, connecting, and collaborating. What we mean by that is show interest in those people that you follow on Twitter. Engage with them, have dialogue with them, and be part of the conversation. So 20% of the time you should be engaging directly with people that you follow on Twitter and with new people that you're just getting to know on Twitter. The 10 represents 10% of your tweets, which can be personal and interesting details. You don't have to just talk about business on Twitter. In fact, if you do, you'll likely be perceived as sort of boring. So think of it as going to a cocktail party. You wouldn't walk into a cocktail party and talk all night about business. You would also talk about personal items once in a while to create interest and to get to know people better. Be transparent, but be tasteful. Don't talk about things that are in poor taste. And be smart about what you tweet about. Typically, we advise clients not to tweet a lot about politics or religion or things that are controversial, that people may be offended by or have issues with. So that's the 70-20-10 rule. We have people often ask us, how often should I tweet? That's different for every person. Most people who are active on Twitter tweet at least once or twice a day, but you can tweet as often as you want. Just remember not to become obnoxious. Now let's talk about the tool again for a few minutes. One of the first things I want to talk to you about is the 4 different ways to communicate with people on Twitter. The first way is to simply key in an update in the box where it says what's happening. So if you key in some content there and publish it and hit update, it goes out to the Twitter sphere to anybody, anywhere that wants to read it. The second way to share information is to do what's called a retweet, or capital R, capital T. The way that you do that is scroll down, and if you see a message that you'd like to share with other people, when you roll over that message, you'll see the word retweet appear in the lower right-hand corner. Click on that. It asks you if you want to retweet to your followers, and click yes. That takes exactly the same content that somebody else has said and retweets it to all of the people who follow you on Twitter. The third way to communicate with people on Twitter is to send them what is called an @ message. The way that you do that is that you use the @ sign just before their Twitter name to publish something that's directed toward them. It's important to remember that the content that you publish when you use an @ message not only draws the attention of the person that you're sending it to, but is also publicly displayed. So if it's something that you want just that person to see, you'll want to use the next technique that I'm going to talk about in a minute, called direct messaging. So this third way, again, is called @ messaging. It's using the @ sign, and it is directed to a person, but also is available publicly. Other people will, in fact, see what you write to that person. The fourth way to communicate with people on Twitter is to send and receive direct messages. You'll notice over on the right-hand side, on this sidebar, there's a link called Direct Messages. This shows that we have one direct message. When you click on the direct message, you'll see that from Blake Hadley we got a message that says, "Hi, I'm having pain in my tooth. Can I get an appointment?" If we want to reply to him as a direct message, only he will see this message. So inside of the Direct Messages tab, we hit Reply and then key in our message to him and then send it. That will not be available for anybody else in the world to see except that person. The second thing I'd like to talk to you about under tools are what we call third-party monitoring tools. These are tools that help you to better manage Twitter. You can use the regular Twitter interface that we've been looking at, or you can download some of these other third-party tools to your desktop, which just allow you to better manage the tweets and to kind of categorize them and make up different lists and different ways of watching Twitter. This is a little bit advanced, so if you don't want to worry about using third-party tools, don't. Just use Twitter inside of the Twitter interface. But if you are interested, these are some of the ones that do a really good job. There's one called TweetDeck, one called Hootsuite, and Seismic. Those three third-party tools are very useful and they're very easy to use. So if you have interest in doing that, go to those websites and learn more about those tools. One of the tools I do want to tell you about that's really important though is called tinyURL. You know you're limited to 140 characters in your tweets. Sometimes if the URL is very long, it takes up half of your 140 characters. But there's a way to shorten those URLs. You go to tinyurl.com and you paste in the website that you want to make a smaller URL for. And then you click Make tinyURL. What that does is it processes it and comes back with a much shorter URL that saves some of those 140 characters in your tweet. This is a very useful tool. We recommend that you use it often. The third thing we want to talk about under tools is finding followers. We talked a little bit about that in the basic training, but we want to offer you some other websites and other resources for finding more people to follow locally. We talked a little bit about search.twitter.com. That's still a good tool for finding followers in your local market. So we encourage you to continue to use that. Another tool that's useful is called Twello. Go to twello.com/TwelloHood. It allows you to click on the area of the country that you're interested in and find followers that way. Very easy and very powerful tool to use. Another one is called Nearby Tweets. This one actually monitors what's being talked about in real time as opposed to looking for people in the area. Sometimes it's useful as well. Another tool that may be useful to you is to print up some small cards in your practice and hand them to people. Let patients know that you're using Twitter. Ask your patients if they're using Twitter, and if so, what their Twitter name is, and then go follow them and become part of their conversations as well. And finally, let's talk a little bit about strategy. There's two things I'd like to talk to you about. One is listening and one is engaging. First of all, listening. Be sure to check your @replies and direct messages often. It's important to do that. Twitter is a very dynamic tool, and when people respond to you or talk to you, they expect that you'll talk back fairly soon. So if you don't answer them or even know that they've talked to you for days at a time, that's not a good sign that you're an engaged and active participant. So be sure to check those off, and I recommend that you check them at least a couple of times a day. Second, engaging. Number one, have meaningful initial engagement with people. If somebody follows you and you go follow them back, don't simply follow them and then respond to them. Look up something, look up their bio, say something about their blog, look up something that's interesting to them and comment on that. Have some kind of personal exchange with them instead of just simply following them back. Number two, use @messages to begin conversations. So when you first start talking to somebody, use the @sign to get their attention. But once you're engaged in some kind of dialogue, use direct messages. That's a better tool because people only see one side of the conversation if you use @messages, and sometimes it confuses other followers. So take that discussion offline by using direct messages to continue long conversations. And number four, continue to use retweets to boost other people's popularity. Using retweets of other people's content shows those people that you're interested in what they have to say and that you find it valuable. So valuable, in fact, that you're willing to share it with your followers.